first let me give you a little bit of historical background. Before the audio-lingual method was created, the direct method was the method used to teach languages. However, in the first half of the 20th century, the direct method was not taking hold in the US as it was in Europe. There were no native-speaking teachers of the modern foreign languages in the US. Students in the US did not have the opportunity to practice their language skills as they did in Europe. Unlike the direct method, the audio-lingual method didn't focus on teaching vocabulary. Rather, the teacher drilled students in the use of grammar. U.S. educational institutions became convinced that a reading approach to foreign languages was more useful than an oral approach, given the perceived linguistic isolation of the U.S. at the time. For this reason, in the 1930s and 40s, they returned to the grammar translation method. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the origins. It started in the United States and in the 1950s. It was developed by the U.S. military. And due to the need for Americans to become orally proficient in the languages of both their allies and their enemies, so it was a language teaching revolution time. The general objective of the audio-lingual method is to teach language communicatively. Short-range objectives include training in listening comprehension, accurate pronunciation, reading comprehension and production, and development of mastery in all four language skills, starting with listening and speaking and using these as a basis for reading and writing. Long-range objective, or the ultimate goal, is to develop in the students the same types of abilities that native speakers have to use it automatically without stopping to think.
Main characteristics. There is a separation of language skills into listening, speaking, reading, and writing, but with an emphasis hold in listening and speaking before reading and writing. There is use of dialogues as the chief means of presenting the language. There is a major emphasis on certain practice techniques, which are mimicry, memorization, and pattern drills. The use of the mother tongue is disencouraged in the classroom. There are other characteristics that we can mention. The structural patterns are taught using repetitive drills. There is little or no grammatical explanation. All the grammar is taught by inductive analogy rather than giving deductive explanation. There is much use of tapes, language labs, and visual aids, and great importance is attached to pronunciation.
The process includes 3 stages: presentation, practice, and application. The presentation stage includes oral stimuli, dialogues, and little explanation. The mother tongue is discouraged, and errors are corrected. Accuracy is emphasized. Accurate repetition and memorization of the dialogue are goals of this stage. The practice includes pattern drills, mastery of structure, and in this stage, fluency is emphasized. Now, application. The use of the structure in different contexts is included in this stage. And now take a look at a video as an example of how a regular class is like using the audio-lingual method.
Good morning, class.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. Today's lesson is going to be about 2 people, about a salesman, a special kind of a salesman. Now, you know what a salesman is. That's a person who sells something to somebody else, a salesman. We're going to, today the salesman is a vacuum cleaner salesman, and the other person, here's the vacuum cleaner salesman, and let me write that. The other person is a woman, or we could call her a housewife. So now, I want you to just listen and watch what I do. Listen carefully, watch what I do, and try to understand, okay? Now, I'm the salesman now, okay? I'm going to be both people. I'm going to play two roles. I'm going to be the salesman and the woman. Okay. Ring, 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 ring. Ring, 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 ring. Now, the woman. Hello? Hello, madam. Would you like to have the cleanest house in town? Yes, of course I would. Then, madam, you need the amazing Hoover vacuum cleaner. No, I don't. Salesman. What? Why not? Because my husband does the cleaning in our house. Oh. Okay, now listen, and I'll do it one more time. You just listen and don't talk this time. Listen again, I'll do it one more time. Salesman. Rings the bell. One. Good morning. Good morning, madam. Would you like to have the cleanest house in town? Yes, of course I would. Then, madam, you need the amazing Hoover vacuum cleaner. The woman says, no, I don't. Salesman says, what? Why not? And the woman says, because my husband does the cleaning in our house. And the salesman says, oh. All right, now, we're going to learn this together now. I'm going to help you learn how to say this whole dialogue, okay? So, please repeat. The first line is the woman says, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The salesman says, good morning. Would you like to have the cleanest house in town?
Good morning. Would you like to have the cleanest house in town?
Okay. House in town. Just say that much. House in town. The cleanest house in town.
The cleanest house in town.
Okay. Now just group D here. The cleanest house in town.
The cleanest house in town.
A. The cleanest house in... That's okay. The cleanest house in town.
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 Okay, now just you. The cleanest house in town.
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 Cleanest.
Cleanest.
The cleanest house in town.
The cleanest house in town.
Good, very good. Okay. This group. The cleanest house in town.
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 Ah, no, just right now, just this group, okay? That's good. In a minute, in a minute. The cleanest house in town. Just
The cleanest house in town.
you, man.
The cleanest house in town.
The cleanest house in town. Good. Everybody, the cleanest house in town.
Cleanest house in town.
Would you like to have the cleanest house in town?
Would you like to have the cleanest house in town?
Would you like to have the cleanest house in town?
Would you like to have the cleanest house in town?
Okay. Would you like to have the cleanest house in town?
Would you like to have the cleanest house in town?
Good. Okay, you.
Would you like to have the cleanest house in town?
The cleanest house in town.
Would you like to have the cleanest house in town?
Good. Okay. From the beginning now, the
audiolingual method had its advantages. It was based on declared linguistic and psychological principles. It was concerned with syntax, not just vocabulary and morphology. It developed simple techniques without translation of varied, graded, and intensive practice of specific features of a language. It used separation of language skills as a pedagogical device. It introduced techniques for auditory and oral practice, and students were active in the classroom.
Now let's talk about the weaknesses of the method. Vocabulary is strictly limited and learned in context. Too much drilling can lead to boredom, which in turn hinders learning. It is found in some cases that student learning by this method may well be able to reproduce the structures without actually knowing their meaning. Like the direct method, this one makes considerable demand on the teacher, expecting him or her to have a near native articulation and intonation. Moreover, the teacher is also expected to be very resourceful and alert, bringing in a variety of materials.
The method was criticized in some aspects. It presented a failure to teach long-term communicative proficiency. Language is not really acquired by a process of habit formation and overlearning. The errors are not necessarily to be avoided at all costs, which the audiolingual method insisted on. This method doesn't allow students to be creative, and they simply replace words provided by the materials following the learned patterns. Here are some final thoughts. The audiolingual method, also known as the Army method, was created by the U.S. military in the 1950s. It had a strong emphasis on behaviorism, using repetitive drills in the classroom. Its main focus was accuracy and fluency in pronunciation and language structure.
We think it is not advisable to base a language class on the audiolingual method because it is not successful as a method itself. However, it can be included as a technique to enhance accurate oral production and to make sure students learn the patterns of grammatically correct sentences. However, in the first half of century, forget!
Here are some final thoughts. The audiolingual Here are some final thoughts. The audiolingual method, which was also called the Army method. Dios mío.